right answers evolve out of having hopefully a better frame around what it is that we're doing here. And this is where the notion of meeting people where they are, but not leaving them there, I think becomes very important, because you have some families who approach the conversation from the perspective of, the assets are ours, we're stewarding those assets for future generations. That's what we're about. That's what we're doing. And then whatever we can do within that frame is fine. So I've seen some families say, as long as from generation 1 to generation 2, we don't lose capital, whatever incremental capital that accrues, we can do whatever we want with. We can be more exploratory, more innovative. We can do more with that capital in a different way. That's one kind of mindset and approach. Another approach is to say, well, it goes back to the conversation on how much is enough. And where, I was working with one family where single mom, 2 girls, kind of out of left field, had this event. And we had a whole conversation around kind of like, what do you do now? It was kind of unanticipated wealth, if you will. And the conversation, it took about 12 to 18 months, but it was around this whole issue of how much money did she feel she needed to have in the bank to feel that she and the girls would be okay, regardless of what might have happened in the future over time. And we ended up in this place of saying, well, if we could put 30% of the capital that she had in very conservative, screen, values-aligned strategies, but things that we knew that would through various kind of markets and crises and things like that would be okay, that would then free up about 70% of the money that she had control over. And her perspective was that capital was a form of energy, and you're better off deploying it in the world to do things than trying to hold it tightly. And so that really liberated her to be able to have a whole nother kind of set of strategies that complemented. They weren't against how she was managing, her core, if you will, but it meant that all the satellite strategies could be much more innovative and risk-taking and a whole host of other things. And I think that was kind of a way to get there. I also think another example is a family that talks about the idea of 1,000-year family, and how do you manage capital with that kind of long-term mindset. And you can imagine for most individuals, thinking in terms of 50 or 100 years is kind of a long-term perspective. So, and what I love about the 1,000-year frame is that over 1,000 years, your family becomes the village, becomes the region, becomes the society, if you will. And so if you're serious about that, you have to think really differently about ownership, stewardship of wealth, performance, engagement of other voices in the conversation. I mean, it opens up a whole bunch of opportunities that can actually be really challenging, because it forces you to think differently. And that's what this, I think, is all about. And the problem for this, when you come at it from the advisor side, is that people come to wealth advisors for answers and solutions. They don't come necessarily to sit more deeply with the question. And so it puts the advisor in I think it's a great position. A lot of advisors are really anxious because they're not used to having to say, I don't know, we could go this way, we could go that way. We could go this way and, redirect in 5 or 10 years. I mean, it just opens up a set of conversations. And I think this is why when I talk with families, I talk to them about being a client collaborator and not being a client customer. Because if your perspective as the asset owner is that my job is to give you financial solutions, that kind of boxes me into a certain set of opportunities or approaches or strategies that I would bring forward. Whereas if we say, well, actually, and this is what we basically, so in wealth management, you have this very linear approach where like at time zero, you have your assets, you have your investment policy statement, you make a portfolio, you construct a portfolio in alignment with that policy statement and the framework that usually has. And then you deploy capital over the course of a year. You get to the end of the year and you pause time, you look at what performance has been, and then you rebalance, right? That's what you do in finance and in investing and wealth management. What we do with our impact folks is we say, well, actually, it's a spiral, right? And there are certain fundamental questions that you have to sit with at different points in the course of a year. And the answers to what it is you're trying to do will change based on shifts in market, but also shifts in community, shifts in solution sets, shifts in the experience of the impact fund managers that you're investing in. And so the answers that you have at time zero are going to be, and they better be different from what they are 3 years out or 5 years or 10 years out. And it's this iterative process of managing capital in a way that is more kind of, again, innovative and creative, as opposed to linear and deterministic and bounded, if you will. And I think that's the opportunity to become freer as advisors, as well as wealth holders and asset owners, is to be involved in that process from that mindset. And that what's the irony is that if you have that approach and then the markets turn and you get clobbered, so many times I've seen families who say, well, we got kind of nailed on the market stuff, but look at what we did in terms of the impact piece, or look at what we were trying to do. I mean, it just shifts the whole relationship to the financial performance piece, which then opens up kind of more opportunities to think differently about the purpose of capital, even as you are using good financial discipline. You're not like setting aside how you should think about economics and finance. You're augmenting those ideas and practices with a different way of advancing your strategy and your capital in the world. So it can be really a powerful way to engage with folks as well.